Edward Said's Orientalism. Edward Said's Orientalism, published in 1978, is a seminal and highly influential work that presents a critical analysis of the Western world's historical and cultural representations of the Orient. Primarily focusing on the Middle East and Asia, Said argues that Orientalism is far more than simple misrepresentation. It's a complex, pervasive, and deeply ingrained system of thought that has fundamentally shaped Western perceptions, power, dynamics, and even the very identity of both the West and the East for centuries. Said's central thesis is that Orientalism is a discourse. Drawing heavily on the work of Michel Foucault, he employs the concept of discourse to define Orientalism as a system of thought, knowledge, and language that actively produces and maintains power relations. It's not just about what is said about the Orient, but how it is said, by whom, and within what historical and political context. Orientalism, in this sense, is a discourse that manufactures a stark and often rigid binary opposition between the Orient and the Occident, the West. This binary is hierarchical, with the Occident consistently positioned as superior and the Orient as inferior. This superiority is asserted across various domains: rationality versus irrationality, progress versus stagnation, civilization versus barbarism, and masculinity versus femininity. Said insists that this binary is not based on objective reality or empirical observation. Instead, it is a construction of the Western imagination and perpetuated through various forms of scholarship, literature, art, and political rhetoric. These stereotypes, while demonstrably false, serve a crucial function. They justify Western domination, colonialism, and intervention in the East. By portraying the Orient as inherently deficient, the West creates a rationale for its own power and control. A central argument is that the Orient is not a pre-existing geographical or cultural reality waiting to be discovered. Rather, it is a Western invention, an idea that has been shaped and reshaped over time to serve Western purposes. European scholars, writers, artists, and politicians have actively constructed a romanticized and often negative image of the East. This construction is based on preconceived notions, cultural biases, and ideological agendas, rather than on objective evidence or genuine engagement with Eastern cultures. This Orient becomes a projection of Western fantasies and anxieties. It is a space where the West can explore its own repressed desires, project its fears, and define itself in opposition to a constructed other. The Orient, in this sense, is a mirror that reflects back the West's own self-image. A key theme in Orientalism is the intricate and often insidious relationship between knowledge and power. Said demonstrates how Western knowledge about the Orient has been inextricably linked to the exercise of Western power and control. Orientalist discourse has not been a neutral or objective pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. Instead, it has been actively used to control and dominate the East. Academic scholarship, travel writing, colonial administration, and even seemingly benign forms of cultural representation all contributed to the construction and dissemination of Orientalist discourse. This discourse, in turn, provided the intellectual and moral justification for Western expansionism, colonialism, and imperialism. The knowledge produced by Orientalism was not simply descriptive, it was prescriptive, dictating how the West should understand and interact with the East. Said emphasizes the crucial role of language and representation in shaping perceptions and perpetuating Orientalist stereotypes. Orientalist discourse employs specific language, imagery, and narrative structures to depict the Orient in a particular way. This language is often loaded with value judgments and reinforces the binary opposition between the West and the East. Words like exotic, mysterious, backward, despotic, sensual, and lazy are used repeatedly to characterize the Orient and its people. These words evoke specific images and associations, contributing to a broader Orientalist narrative. Representations in literature, art, and popular culture further perpetuate these images, often in subtle and insidious ways. These representations, become so pervasive that they are often internalized and accepted as objective truths. Said argues that Orientalism is not simply a relic of the colonial past. It is not a phenomenon that disappeared with the end of formal colonialism. Rather, Orientalist assumptions and stereotypes continue to influence Western attitudes and policies towards the Middle East and Asia in the post-colonial era, even after the decline of direct colonial rule. Orientalist discourse has adapted and persisted in new forms. It is evident in media representations, political discourse, academic studies, and even everyday conversations. This persistence demonstrates the deep-seated nature of Orientalist thinking and its enduring power to shape perceptions. Said also highlights the damaging effects of Orientalism not only on how the West views the East, but also on how people from the East view themselves. The internalization of Orientalist stereotypes can lead to feelings of inferiority, self-doubt, cultural alienation, and a sense of being defined and represented by others. When people from the East are constantly confronted with negative and demeaning representations of their own cultures, it can have a profound impact on their self-esteem and cultural identity. This internalization can perpetuate a cycle of oppression and hinder efforts to challenge Western dominance. Said meticulously traces the historical development of Orientalism, demonstrating its evolution and adaptation from ancient Greece to the modern era. He argues that the roots of Orientalist thought can be traced back to ancient Greece. Early Greek writers like Aeschylus and Euripides depicted Asia as the other, contrasting it with Greek civilization and establishing a pattern of viewing the East as exotic, inferior, and a threat to the West. This early binary laid the foundation for later Orientalist constructions. During the European Enlightenment, European thinkers began to develop more systematic and scientific theories about the Orient. Figures like Anquetil Duperron and William Jones studied Oriental languages and cultures, but their work was often influenced by existing prejudices and assumptions. Even with increased scholarly interest, Orientalist biases persisted. The 19th century witnessed the height of European colonialism, and Orientalism played a crucial role in justifying and facilitating imperial expansion. Scholars, administrators, and writers used Orientalist knowledge to govern and control colonized populations. Writers like Gustave Flaubert and Edward Lane produced highly influential Orientalist texts that shaped Western perceptions of the East. This was the period when Orientalism became most closely intertwined with political power. Said argues that Orientalism persisted into the 20th and 21st centuries, even after the decline of formal colonialism. He focuses particularly on the ways in which Orientalist discourse has shaped Western perceptions of the Middle East in the context of the Arab-Israeli conflict and the War on Terror. He critiques the work of influential scholars like Bernard Lewis and figures like Henry Kissinger for perpetuating Orientalist stereotypes and justifying Western intervention in the region. Said demonstrates the continuity of Orientalist thought in the modern era. Said offers a scathing critique of the methodology and assumptions of traditional Orientalist scholarship. He argues that Orientalists often relied on abstract theories, generalizations, and textual representations rather than empirical observation, fieldwork, and genuine engagement with contemporary realities. They treated the Orient as a static and unchanging entity, ignoring its diversity, dynamism, and historical complexity. Said also highlights the inherent power imbalance in Orientalist studies. Western scholars often position themselves as the authoritative voices on the Orient, speaking for the Orient and silencing the voices of those who actually lived there. This created a distorted and incomplete picture of the East, reinforcing Western dominance and denying Eastern agency. Orientalism has had a profound and lasting impact on various academic fields, including post-colonial studies, literary criticism, history, cultural studies, and anthropology. It has challenged traditional Western perspectives on the East and inspired a critical re-examination of cultural representations, power relations, and the politics of knowledge. Said's work has also been instrumental in empowering scholars, intellectuals, and activists from the Middle East and Asia to challenge Orientalist stereotypes, reclaim their own narratives, and assert their own cultural identities. Orientalism has provided a framework for understanding and resisting Western cultural hegemony. Despite its immense influence, Orientalism has also faced criticism from various quarters. Some scholars have argued that Said's portrayal of Orientalism is too monolithic, and that he ignores the diversity of Western views on the East. They contend that not all Western scholars and writers have subscribed to Orientalist stereotypes, and that Said's analysis oversimplifies a complex and nuanced history. Others have criticized Said's primary focus on textual representations, arguing that he neglects the complexities of historical, political, and economic realities. They believe that his emphasis on discourse overshadows the importance of material factors in shaping the relationship between the West and the East. Additionally, some have argued that Said's own perspective is influenced by his own background, biases, and political commitments. They suggest that his analysis is not entirely objective and that it reflects his own experiences as a Palestinian intellectual living in the West. However, despite these criticisms, Orientalism remains a landmark work that has fundamentally altered the way we think about the relationship between the West and the East. Its enduring power lies in its ability to provoke critical thinking, challenge assumptions, and inspire new avenues of inquiry. To provide a more detailed understanding, it's helpful to consider the book's structure. Said begins by introducing his central argument, clearly stating that Orientalism is not simply a collection of misrepresentations, but a powerful and pervasive discourse that produces a power relationship between the Orient and the Occident. He offers several interconnected definitions of Orientalism, highlighting its various dimensions, as an academic field, as a style of thought, and as a political and cultural force. He defines Orientalism as a style of thought based upon an ontological and epistemological distinction made between the Orient and, most of the time, the Occident. This emphasizes the fundamental nature of the binary opposition. He outlines the scope of his study, focusing primarily on the Middle East and the influence of British and French colonialism, while acknowledging the broader applicability of his analysis. Said emphasizes the crucial importance of understanding the historical and political context in which Orientalist discourse emerged, evolved, and continues to operate. The book then delves into the various meanings and manifestations of Orientalism, exploring its academic, imaginative, and political dimensions. He demonstrates how these dimensions are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. He meticulously examines the role of Orientalist scholars, institutions, and academic disciplines in shaping Western understanding of the East. He critiques the notion of objective scholarship, revealing the ideological underpinnings of Orientalist knowledge production. He analyzes literary and artistic representations of the Orient, highlighting their stereotypical, romanticized, and often distorted nature. He shows how these representations contribute to the broader Orientalist narrative. Said establishes the crucial connection between Orientalism and colonial power, demonstrating how knowledge about the Orient was actively used to justify, facilitate, and maintain Western domination. He argues that Orientalism was not merely a byproduct of colonialism, but an essential tool of imperial control. Said introduces and develops the concept of imaginative geography, arguing that the Orient is not a real, tangible place, but also an imagined space constructed by the Western imagination. This imagined space is shaped by Western fantasies, fears, and desires, and it plays a crucial role in defining the relationship between the West and the East. He analyzes how geographical descriptions, maps, and travel narratives have been used to define, categorize, and control the Orient. He shows how these seemingly objective tools of representation are imbued with Orientalist assumptions and biases. Said examines the role of travel writing in shaping Western perceptions of the East, highlighting its tendency to exoticize, romanticize, and often distort Eastern cultures. He critiques the genre of travel writing as a key site for the production and dissemination of Orientalist stereotypes. He dissects the construction of specific Oriental stereotypes, such as the image of the sensual, lazy, despotic, and unchanging Oriental. He reveals the ideological functions of these stereotypes, in justifying Western power and control. The book also includes a more methodological section, outlining Said's theoretical approach to studying Orientalism. He explicitly draws on the work of Michel Foucault, particularly the concept of discourse, to analyze the power dynamics inherent in Orientalist representations. He explains how discourse operates as a system of knowledge and power, shaping both what can be said and what remains unspoken. Said emphasizes the importance of examining the historical and political context in which Orientalist texts and representations were produced. He argues that texts cannot be understood in isolation, but must be situated within their specific historical and political circumstances. He discusses the limitations of traditional Orientalist scholarship, particularly its tendency to abstract and generalize about the Orient. He argues for a more critical, nuanced, and historically grounded approach to the study of cultural relations. Said explores the crisis of Orientalism in the 20th century, particularly in the context of decolonization, the rise of Arab nationalism, and the increasing challenges to Western dominance. He examines the various ways in which Orientalist discourse has adapted and persisted in the post-colonial era, despite the formal end of colonialism. He shows how Orientalist assumptions continue to shape Western attitudes and policies towards the Middle East. Said critiques the work of influential scholars like Bernard Lewis, arguing that their writings often perpetuate Orientalist stereotypes, essentialize Arab culture, and serve to justify Western intervention in the region. He engages in specific textual analysis to demonstrate these points. He discusses the role of the media, popular culture, and political rhetoric in shaping public perceptions of the Arab world, highlighting their tendency to focus on conflict, extremism, and cultural difference. He analyzes contemporary examples of Orientalist representations. In a later edition, Said reflects on the reception of Orientalism and responds to some of the criticisms it has received. He clarifies his arguments, addresses misunderstandings, and emphasizes the importance of understanding the complexity and diversity of both the West and the East. He acknowledges the limitations of his own work and calls for further research and analysis. Said discusses the ongoing challenges of overcoming Orientalist stereotypes, prejudices, and power imbalances. He argues for the necessity of a more nuanced, critical, and self-reflexive approach to cultural understanding. He concludes by calling for a recognition of the shared humanity of all people, a rejection of essentialist and reductive categorizations, and a commitment to dialogue and mutual respect. He offers a vision for a more just and equitable future. Throughout the book, Said provides numerous examples and illustrations to support his arguments and make his analysis more concrete. These include Gustave Flaubert's Travels in Egypt, Edward Lane's An Account of the Manners and Customs of the Modern Egyptians, the depiction of the Orient in Western art, the writings of Bernard Lewis on the Middle East, and media representations of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Orientalism has had a profound and lasting impact on academic discourse, cultural studies, and public understanding of the relationship between the West and the East. It has inspired a vast body of scholarship and activism that challenges Orientalist stereotypes, deconstructs power relations, and promotes cultural understanding. The book remains remarkably relevant today, as issues of cultural representation, identity politics, and power continue to shape global politics and social relations. Said's work provides a crucial framework for critically examining the ways in which knowledge is produced, disseminated, and used to maintain power structures. In conclusion, Edward Said's Orientalism is a complex, challenging, and ultimately transformative book that offers a powerful and enduring critique of Western representations of the East. It argues that Orientalism is not simply a matter of misrepresentation, but a pervasive discourse of power that has shaped Western perceptions, justified Western domination, and had profound consequences for both the West and the East for centuries. While the book has faced its share of criticism, it remains a landmark work that has fundamentally altered our understanding of cultural relations, the politics of knowledge, and the legacies of colonialism and imperialism.